I personally thought the 4-1, the result, is perhaps a bit more brutal than the game suggests. The two Foden goals in particular, I mean, they're world class, right? Um,
Mm.
but 4-1 seemed a little bit high at the end. But it's also the world that we live in right now. That one of Germany's top teams has a really hard time competing against someone like Man City. I'm looking at the XG here right now. Man City's XG was 0.96 compared to
Mm.
Dortmund's 1.00. So there's maybe a world where this game ends a little bit different, and like all the other stats are very balanced, right?
Mhm.
Actually, let me correct that. Man City's XG was 1.98 and Dortmund's was 1.02. But still, like this is a game that could also end up a lot tighter. But
Mm.
Man City were by far the stronger team. Um, and so this is the world we live in right now. I think that a team like Dortmund, that on its best days last year could easily challenge a Premier League team, is not quite there yet at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect to Dortmund, like I know they're both competing in the Champions League, but they're leagues apart when it comes to a club like Manchester City. Like, even if you want to use the market values that we have on transfer market, I think if I'm
Mm,
not mistaken, like Dortmund's squad's worth like 500 million. I
yeah,
think Man City's 1.2 billion, maybe, it's if not higher. So, I mean, we're
yeah.
talking about a Man City squad that's got twice the resources of Dortmund in terms of just sheer playing stock. Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting game. Dortmund just really struggles, and I guess, Manu, if you think about it, kind of played out in a very similar way to the Bayern game, in the way that Dortmund were completely blown away in the first half, didn't know what they were doing, they were chasing shadows, chasing their own tails, looked like it was going to be a bloodbath, and then they maybe kind of managed to kind of pull back some sort of credibility in the second half. And obviously, in the last kind of 10, 15 minutes, maybe Man City just turned off. They thought the game was done, but then Dortmund kind of turned it on, and they had a good flurry of chances. So you're right; it could have ended maybe a little bit differently. I don't really foresee any situation where Dortmund don't lose this game, though. To be perfectly honest with you,
Yeah.
and I think that's maybe something that Kovac maybe will have to address. I spent much of this game thinking, how did Dortmund fix this scenario in the second half of the season? Who do they go out and sign in January to try and lift themselves to a certain level? Because I think Kovac deserves a lot of credit for the way he's managed to eke out a lot of talent and performances out of largely a squad that he inherited. There hasn't been a huge amount of wholesale changes to this team. In fact, if I've just quickly run through it myself on top of my head, I'm not sure there's any players in that team that started yesterday that weren't at the club when Kovac joined. I don't think so. I mean, the only one that stood out is obviously Bellingham perhaps and Silva, but they came on the second half, didn't start. Um, so, it was a starting 11 of players that Kovac has inherited. So I know they broke the transfer record, signed Bellingham, but overall, the squad hasn't had a huge amount of investment in it, I would say. And I think this game did a good job of highlighting maybe the limits of that Dortmund team. Guys like Benzemaini can do a perfectly good job for Dortmund in the Bundesliga, but I think when they come up against world-class players, they
Mm,
really struggle. I thought Benzemaini and Svensson had a horrid time down that left-hand side. I thought Ryerson had a terrible time down the right-hand side.
yeah.
Um, and the two things that stood out to me was, A, the tactics didn't suit Dortmund. They suited Man City because it allowed guys like Foden to kind of play in the half spaces between the defence midfield, sorry, the midfield and attack, and allowed Savinho and Doku to kind of just go toe to toe with Svensson and Ryerson on out there. Um, and actually, if you look at I've got like Dortmund's pass map in front of me, which has like the average positioning, and Benzemaini is basically playing at left back, and Svensson's
Mm,
basically playing at left wing, and Bayer's kind of playing off Guirassy. And I think that's because Benzemaini kept getting pulled over to help Svensson throughout this match because of the way that Savinho was kind of just overrunning him. So I didn't think the tactics worked quite well. But then I think the other issue is that, you know, I think one of our subscribers mentioned this at halftime. There's no one really on that bench you could turn to kind of change things dramatically. For example,
mm.
there was no real kind of standout replacement to bring on for Benzemaini unless you want to kind of turn to Nicolas Sula, who I'm not even sure was on the bench actually, if I'm not mistaken. No, he wasn't. And Emre Can eventually kind of comes on, and Pascal Gross comes on, and it's all much of a muchness. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think going to Man City and losing is the be all and end all of Dortmund's season. I don't think it even has a huge impact on their group stage performance. Someone said to me at full time on Blue Sky, a Dortmund fan, saying, "I'm going to forget about this game in 20 minutes." And that unfortunately is just kind of the consequences of this new format, where you do kind of get a lot of dead rubbers in the middle of the fixture list. But nonetheless, I think it was very illustrative of the limitations in his Dortmund team. And if I was Kovac, or if I was Sebastian Kehl, or whoever else, and I was looking at his performance, I'd be saying, we probably need to get cover for Benzbaini, if not an improvement on him. I think Dortmund are still missing a genuine defensive midfielder, because as good as Mecha and Sabitzer have been this season, I think the latter, Sabitzer, has looked really slow at times against really good players. I think he looked really slow against Bayern, if I'm not mistaken. It was that game. Maybe it was a Leipzig game I'm thinking of. But he looked like he was 2 or 3 steps behind every Man City player tonight. Neither of them could keep an eye on Foden. And then there's also still that problem with Guirassy, who is just still kind of struggling to kind of show the form of last season. So those are kind of 3 problem positions that if I was Dortmund and I had maybe 30 or 40 million euros to spend in January, I'd be kind of thinking how we could do that, because not to say that it's a must-win game by any means, and I don't think it's really something that Dortmund have to kind of worry too much about, but against probably on paper one of the best teams in Europe, I think they came up short quite notably in a number of positions.
I mean, as you mentioned, like when you spoke about who would be the number one thing that they need to sign, I wanted to shout out a number 9. I think it's quite apparent now, isn't it? That is in that spell at the start of the game where they could have maybe scored 1 or 2 goals. The thing that was lacking the most was a killer in the box. Someone like Guirassy last year, who was just there and would score goals on a consistent basis, and someone who's there when Karim Adeyemi misses, right, which he does far too frequently, in my opinion. And that is the big thing for the side at the moment, that they don't have a consistent goal scorer on I wanted to say world-class level, but I would say even international level, right? Guirassy, I mean, he had 20 plus goals in the Bundesliga last year. Doubtful he will get there this year. He had 9 goals, I think, in the Champions League last year. No chance that will happen this year. And all these other things, you can patch that up, right? And Kovac is doing so much with the little goals that they are scoring. But if you come up against a big team like Man City, you need to kill them early. And you need a guy who, when the ball falls to him in the box, will just score. Like Erling Haaland did, and when he scored, or Foden, the 2 goals that he scored out of nowhere. Dortmund don't have a single player in the squad at the moment who can do these things, right? And that is, if you ask me, the number one thing that they need at the moment. They need a killer who can score goals, who can guarantee them 30 plus goals across all competitions. And if Guirassy can no longer do that, you need to go out in the winter and buy one.